So you're at home one day and you say, Black Lives Matter. Because I'm intrigued by the fact that, how did you even come up with the idea? We knew Black Lives Matter, but nobody said it out loud or created a movement that was so simplistic yet impactful.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was actually in Salinas Valley, which I don't know if you're familiar with Salinas
Wait, up
Valley.
north?
Yes.
Of course I know
exactly.
Salinas.
Which is also a prison town. I was visiting one of my mentees who had just caught a robbery case, and it was the same weekend that we were all waiting for the acquittal of George Zimmerman, or we were waiting for what was going to happen. I didn't think he was going to get acquitted. Like, we all knew he killed a young boy.
Trayvon Martin.
Yes, Trayvon Martin. So I was sitting up in the prison, and I was meeting with Rich, and at the time his wife and his best friend, Haywan, and we were all sitting and talking and processing in the visiting room. And I remember Rich kind of being like, nothing's gonna happen. And I was like, no, let's be more hopeful. Like, something's gonna happen. Get back home that night, get on social media, and then start to see like, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. And I just remember, I still get emotional thinking about it. Like, I remember crying and just being like, is this really what we're doing in 2013? Like, this is the outcome. And I went on social media, I went on Facebook. That's when we were all using it. I don't know when the last time I went to Facebook, but.
Because Instagram was a thing, but it wasn't a thing.
It wasn't a thing, exactly. And I remember going to Alicia Garza's page, because that's my girl. And I was like, what's Alicia saying? Like, and she was popping off, and she was like, because a lot of people were saying, why are we surprised? Why are we even upset? This is what they do to us. And she was like, no, I'm always going to be surprised when they do this to us. I'm always going to be upset.
Meaning people were complacent with the fact that this was actually happening, where a man hunted a young boy down in his community who just went to the store and murdered him and is getting away with it.
Yes, so many people on social media were like tripping, that people were tripping. It was a lot of Black people, And Alicia, said, she wrote this love note and she said Black Lives Matter. And then the minute I saw it, I put a hashtag on it. And I was like, we got to put let's make this thing go viral. That's literally what I said to her. And from there, we spent really the next year, and Opal Tometi, also there's three of us. She goes by Ayo Tometi now. The three of us spent the next year trying to figure out, like, how do we use this thing? How do we get people to not be afraid of saying Black and Black Lives Matter, and really started to have conversations. It was a conversation piece at first, and it was like an online strategy, and then slowly it would build into what is now a global movement.
Well, what was your background at the time? Like, what was your day-to-day
I was taking
life?
on the sheriff's department in Los Angeles.
So you were already an activist?
Yes, I was already. I was about 10 years in at that point. So I had successfully won a bunch of campaigns in Los Angeles. I was a local organizer. I had just started the Dignity and Power Now, which was my very first nonprofit organization. And I was taking on the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. My brother was actually brutally beaten by the sheriffs inside the jails. He almost died when I was 16 years old, and it changed my life. It changed everything. And I got an opportunity to hold them accountable. And so I started doing that work 1 year before starting Black Lives Matter.
So when you were an organizer, were you a community organizer? Were you working for a union, a foundation?
I was a community, you know that because you were a union organizer, exactly.
Yeah.
Only people who've been inside that space would know to ask those questions.
Yeah.
I was a grassroots organizer.
Okay.
So I was in the streets every single day. I was at the jails every single day.
Grassroots means you don't have a large fund.
Yes.
You don't have no big backing by a
Yes.
family fund or anything like that. You're grassroots. You are literally from the mud.
That's right.
Organizing.
And I was meeting with, foundations and other organizations, basically being like, what's the appetite to fund work that takes on the police? And at that point, nobody wanted to do that. They're like, no, we don't want to touch this.
But let's talk about why, because I don't think people understand the community construct of policing. Like, there's unions, right? I worked for a union. There was no way you were going to come into Kaiser Permanente and do anything to a worker who was doing anything they wanted to do, even if they weren't supposed to.
That's right.
Because you had to weigh whether or not you're going to fight this machine that has millions of dollars, that has a loyalty pledge to their membership.
That's exactly right.
And has a perception to maintain of we don't lose for our members.
That's exactly right.
So going up against the police, you're going up against a machine that is very well organized and very well funded.
Yes. And, you know, I was 28 when I started Dignity and Power Now and started going after the sheriff's department. I knew that the police were, I knew that they were well funded. I don't think I understood how big the machine was.
Oh, yeah.
And how far reaching
How
until much
organized
later.
the communication is,
Yes.
how the press works. They
Yes.
have the infrastructure to destroy anybody
Literally.
or hide anything.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I don't think I fully understood that. It wasn't until I would say, you know, BLM started to really take on police violence and we started to uncover the role of the unions and the lobbies and then, you know, obviously everything that's happening now where I'm like, oh, they will go after and destroy. That's what they do.
All right, so when you all are planning this and the hashtag, are you still promoting it or is it now you're just planning it? Because at that point, Black Lives Matter as a hashtag had gone viral.
Exactly.
But
It went viral multiple times.
But was there like a movement attached to it or did it just become a movement of the people?
No, it was not a movement attached to it yet. It was a lot of direct actions. There was a lot of people using it. You know, there's some like famous signs of us on Rodeo Drive because the Los Angeles team is the first chapter of the Black Lives Matter Global Network, which would eventually become that. But our first protest was on Rodeo Drive. We were like, we don't need a protest in Crenshaw. We know that Crenshaw knows what's going on. Let's take this to Rodeo Drive. We have these big Black Lives Matter signs that became a really iconic moment on the steps of Rodeo Drive.
I live in LA. No, I said, but I thought it was smart because we were rioting in our community,
Exactly.
burning down our businesses, doing all this shit that they expected us to do and
That's
being
right.
angry and continuing to create this culture of, you know, disbelief that you can bring justice or like that pain just stays centralized
That's
to our
exactly
communities.
right.
When y'all came to Rodeo, and I remember driving through Beverly Hills, I said, oh, this nigga's white people are going to go crazy because now you got their attention.
That's right.
So that was specifically intentional.
That was so intentional. We did not want to bait the cops in our neighborhoods. We knew how that would go.
Because by protesting, you bring them to you.
That's exactly right. So, you know, I remember when we organized it was Melina Abdullah and it was her students, Cal State LA students that organized that protest. And we built the route and everything. And I remember the cops calling me the night before. Cause you know, we're putting everything on Facebook at this point. Like, you know, I'm putting a Facebook invite. Like I'm not no security culture.
Yeah.
There's no signal. You know, there's nothing other than like blasting what you're doing. And the cops called me the night before and I was like, how'd they find my number? And I was like, oh, I think I put it on the flyer. And they're like, ma'am, we hear you're holding a protest tomorrow and And you know, that this is, like you said, pre any resources, pre like it being global. And we were just doing it from our heart. And I remember talking to the police saying, yes, we are. And, you know, they're like, you know, we'll be bringing our, you know, motorcades and things like that because we don't get permits when we do protests. So they, you know, brought their motorcade and we went in and out, and that protest for me changed everything because if you're from LA, you know that, and probably from California too, because New Yorkers, y'all can get millions of people out for a protest. Like people will hit the streets. In LA, you know, hundreds maybe. But we got 3,000 people. It was the largest protest at that point I had ever helped facilitate. And it was meaningful because I felt the energy of the people of Los Angeles, and I would argue the country, wanting to do more. And there was a younger generation, you know, we're used to, you know, I call him OG and he always laughs about it, Reverend Al Sharpton, and we were used to Jesse Jackson, and we were used to all the old heads, you know, kind of like staging our response.
And they had the visibility of the civil rights era. They had the press machine.
That's
they
exactly
had
right.
the infrastructure to turn that out. This became something very different.
This was organic. It was truly organic, and it was a time. It was a time to be alive and to feel this like, oh, we are all doing this together, and we are all going to challenge, which for so many of us, you know, who grew up Black and poor, like I did, like the police were our primary enemy. Like going outside, we knew all the police on the block and they knew our names.
That's fun. You know, back in Stockton, I always think about this guy named Superman. That was a cop because he would literally jump out his car and take off and catch you in the street. You're like, damn, it's Superman. But we did know our police.
Yes, and not in a good way. Like it wasn't like, you know, the police shows where the cop shows up and brings the kid back and is playing baseball. Like these people beat us up. These people harassed us. And So to have a movement start building where we could finally hold them accountable, it was almost like cathartic for me.
And it wasn't still an established organization? That was
Wasn't
still just,
established yet. We didn't become an established organization until 2020. Before 2020, we were fiscally sponsored.
and let's go back. Trayvon
Yes.
Martin started, that was in 2012, 13.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's 7 years of just grassroots. Everybody's bought into the movement,
Yes.
not formalized as an institution.
It's not formalized as an institution. At that point, we're calling ourselves a decentralized network, which we are. And many of us are traveling around the world, kind of like preaching the BLM story. Like, you could do BLM in your country too. Like, you know, and I remember going to the UK in 2015 and all the, you know, Black Brits being like, how do you do this? Like, and then I remember, you know, we were really explicit. I was really explicit. I was like, we shut shit down.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're doing. And we staged our first action in the UK, and I just remember I could still hear it, all of them being like, Black Lives Matter. It was like, that's when I started to be like, oh, I think like this is gonna be global. Like,
Well,
I think we're gonna do this
Because
thing.
I also think Black people in America don't realize Black people in, you know, Libya are still fighting slavery.
That's
you know,
right.
like there's Black people all over the world who are in some way or another feeling like their Black life doesn't matter.
That's
So I think the
exactly right.
connectivity between the simple hashtag was something that resonated, regardless if it was a Mike Brown or Tamir Rice or a Trayvon Martin,
That's
but it
right.
was also like the Libyan slave trade,
That's
or
right.
you know how Black people in other countries were not being able to show up.